Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Girl Next Door, written by Dr. Blackjack 21. Jeremy's parents were back from greeting the new neighbors, though it was odd his mom still had her welcome to the neighborhood casserole dish in hand. She also looked like she was freaking out over something as she spoke with Dad. I can't believe I did that the first time we meet, and I insult his entire people. For his part, Dad grinned patiently and hugged Mom from the side, avoiding the still hot casserole dish. Oh, honey, it wasn't that bad. They've only started moving into our neighborhoods, and everyone expects there to be the occasional misunderstanding. He even said that it was fine. Just make sure next time you bring something more meat-based. Jeremy didn't wait around to see what this was all about. He was just getting to the good part of his book and wanted to go to his favorite warm summer day reading spot. Though, as the screen door slammed behind him, he couldn't help but wonder what the big deal was all about. Everyone was freaking out about the new neighbors, one way or another. Some said that it would ruin the neighborhood, and others thought that it was exciting. But he couldn't see what the big deal was. After all, it wasn't anywhere near as exciting as half the adventures he read about in his books. But as he scrabbled up his favorite tree and settled into the best reading nook, he forgot all about it as he opened the quickly wearing pages of his book. He hadn't been reading long when a girl's voice broke him out of his concentration. What you doing? Lowering the book, Jeremy felt the tree shake slightly as the girl swung up onto a nearby branch with surprising ease. Looking up at the much larger, heavier, and greener girl, Jeremy suspected he realized what was so different about the new neighbors. The girl was an orc. Not sure what to say or do, Jeremy decided to answer the question she'd asked from the ground. I'm reading a book. The girl made a face that clearly expressed her thoughts on the idea of reading. Ugh. I thought it was some vacation here. Did they give you some homework or something? Jeremy knew most of the other kids felt the same as her, but it still annoyed him that she just belittled one of his books like that. No, this isn't homework. I just like reading. The girl made another face. Really? Oh, the books are so boring. Jeremy frowned. Well, maybe you've just been reading boring books? This time, she looked more thoughtful as she spoke again. Okay, what's that about? Realizing she wasn't about to let him get back to reading without answering at least some of the girl's questions, Jeremy closed the book and the bookmark before answering. It's about a family that got shipwrecked on a deserted island. They built a huge, complicated treehouse with pulleys and bridges to move stuff around. They even fought off pirates who came to loot the island. After a moment's thought, the girl shrugged. All right, that does sound pretty cool, but it's still a book. Let's do something fun, like wrestling or tug of rope. Looking up at the girl, it was easy to see she was not only taller than him, she probably weighed at least twice as much. Jeremy shook his head. No point, you would just win. After a moment, she grinned. All right, well, come on, I'll find us something fun to do. Now Jeremy was really getting annoyed. I don't want to find something fun to do. I want to read my book. Now the girl looked confused, her brow furrowed, and thought, what? You surrendered, so I'm in charge. Jeremy remembered reading about something like this in social studies at school. Orcs usually decided on their leaders through shows of strength. With a sigh, he answered her unasked question. That's how orcs decide who's in charge, but not humans. We do things differently. Still looking confused, the girl's response was, okay, how do humans decide things? Jeremy thought for a moment. Lots of ways. Voting is a good one. Everyone says their ideas, and we vote. Whatever gets the most votes wins. The girl grinned. Okay, I vote for going and riding bikes. Jeremy didn't grin. And I vote for reading my book. The girl looked confused. So, what do we do if it's a tie? Jeremy shrugged, pretending like this wasn't his plan all along. I guess we can do our own thing. You can ride your bike, I can read my book. However, instead of leaving, the girl sat down on the branch and kept thinking. After a few moments, Jeremy was thinking about getting back to reading. But then she brightened and shot back to her feet. Well, how about we build a treehouse, like in your book? As annoyed as he was at the girl refusing to let him read in peace, Jeremy had to admit this idea sounded at least a little fun. Okay, but how? Where will we get the wood? Who's going to design it? Where are we going to get the tools to build it? The girl grinned, showing off her very pronounced and very sharp teeth. "Oh, that's the easy part. My dad's a carpenter. He's got plenty of wooden tools lying around, so you tell me what you need and where, and I'll lift it and hold it in place while you hammer it all together." As she hopped out of the tree, Jeremy was surprised to find he'd already gotten up to follow. After a moment, he blinked, realized that he'd forgotten something. "Oh, I'm Jeremy, by the way. What's your name?" Looking back up, the orc girl's grin was as wide as ever. "I'm Naz." As the summer was coming to an end, Jeremy was sitting in his favorite reading spot up in the treehouse he and Naz had built together. Well, mostly them anyway. Her dad had double-checked their work and reinforced a few places he'd found questionable for holding the weight of an orc, but it was still mostly their work. It wasn't quite as epic as it had been in the book. Their bridge was just 3 ropes, 1 to walk on and 2 for the hands to hold on. And rather than a complicated series of pulleys, they just had a rope wrapped around a higher branch with a basket at the end so that they could throw their backpacks inside and lift them into the tree. Honestly, it wasn't any easier than it was just wearing their packs while climbing the tree, but Naz had insisted that they try and copy the book in as many ways as possible. Just as he finished his book, a familiar face appeared over the ladder as Naz climbed the last few steps into the treehouse. "Are you done with your book of yours yet? I want to go do something fun." Jeremy smiled slightly. Despite the summer together, Naz still didn't get his weird obsession with reading. However, she had to take what she called human classes before school started to help her integrate with her new school. While Jeremy and his family helped out frequently, he still had plenty of time to read books while she was studying. But now that she'd done her work for the day, it was time to do something she considered fun. Though he did veto anything like arm wrestling ever again. It felt like she nearly broke his arm last time. Putting his book in his pocket, Jeremy grabbed onto the rope they'd hung to climb down and eased himself to the ground. It hadn't been that easy to use at first, but after a summer of climbing and building, it seemed easier by the day, even if Naz still made him look like a klutz in comparison. However, before Jeremy reached the ground, Jeremy's mom was shouting for him out the back door. "Jeremy, you forgot to take Dash out for a walk this morning and he's getting into trouble." As if on cue, Dash, a little terrier, shot out from behind the woman blocking the door and made a beeline for him, the leash already attached to the dog's collar, dragging behind him on the grass as he ran up to the 2 kids, excitedly wagging his tail. Jeremy smiled apologetically to Naz. "Sorry, your turn is going to have to wait. Apparently I have to take Dash for a walk." Naz didn't seem fazed and shrugged. "That's okay, I'll come with. We could go down to the pond and see if there's any ducks for him to chase." Jeremy laughed. "Maybe, but as small as he is, he'll probably hide from them. They're more likely to chase him." At that, Naz stared at the dog in the way Jeremy was coming to think of, as her trying to understand human culture face. Then, when she just didn't come out and say what was on her mind, he gave her a verbal nudge. "All right, what's the question?" Having been caught, Naz smiled, with a bit of embarrassment before answering. "Well, in human class, we learned how you keep dogs to help you hunt, like some orcs keep wargs to ride. But what does Dash help you hunt? It doesn't seem like something so small would be very good hunting anything." At the thought of Dash trying to hunt anything, Jeremy laughed again. "Oh, Dash doesn't hunt anything. He's not a hunting dog. He's just a pet." Naz didn't look any less confused. "Well, if he doesn't hunt, how does it help you and your family?" Jeremy shrugged. "Well, Dash doesn't help much at all. Not the way you're thinking. He's loyal and a friend, always there for you. That's all he needs to be." Naz looked skeptical, but with Dash running around all crazy, it was hard to find him a little cute. Finally, she shrugged. "I'll take your word for it. Do you still want to take him to the pond?" Jeremy grinned again. "Sure, sounds fun." As they wandered down the street, they chatted about important things, like what they might be having for dinner, what final summer blockbuster to go see at the movies, or if modern orc music took its inspiration from rock or the other way around. They were so engrossed in the last subject's debate that Jeremy didn't even see the other orc kids until they were practically right on top of them. The tallest of the lot laughed loudly, seeing the 2 walking down the same path that the group was on. Jeremy realized the other orcs must have moved into the city, but this was the first time he'd seen any other than Naz and her family. As the other towering orcs walked up, he suddenly felt very small and very alone. The one who'd laughed spoke up first, his accent much thicker than Naz. "Oi! You're a pretty shrimpy one, aren't you? I'll doubt you could even take a single punch." With that, the Orc seemed determined to put his theory to the test because he drew back his fist, then launched forward, giving Jeremy just enough time to wonder why his life wasn't flashing before his eyes as Dash barked his little heart out. However, before the blow could land, another large green fist intercepted it as Naz grabbed the larger Orc's fist, pulled him forward, and slammed her forehead into his. As the Orc fell to the ground, and to stunned silence of his friends, Naz spoke up loudly and firmly enough that everyone listened. Jeremy noticed the accent thickened a little as well. "Oi, rock for range, that's how Orcs say hello, not humans. Did you forget everything we've learned in class?" Jeremy reined Dash in as the large Orc rubbed his forehead when Naz had slammed her forehead into his and spoke up. "Sorry about that. I just saw a Humie with an Orc and figured he must be all right. That's all. I swear." Naz crossed her arms as if she stared down at the other Orc. Finally, she helped him up. "Well, this is Jeremy, and he is all right, but you still can't punch him. You'll break him if you do that. If you want to say hello, shake his hand like humans do." As the large Orc reached out a hand, Jeremy hesitantly reached forward. But before they could shake, Naz spoke up again firmly. "And don't try and squeeze his hand too tight." After that, Jeremy thought about retracting his hand, but the Orc grabbed a hold of it and shook it before he could. It was definitely one of the more firm handshakes Jeremy had ever experienced, but he doubted there would be any bruising, so he didn't think the Orc was trying to hurt him. Naz slapped the big Orc on the side of the head. "And don't forget to introduce yourself." The Orc winced and his grip tightened just a bit, but when Jeremy pulled back, he quickly let go and rubbed his head again. Yeah, I'm Jarrett, and these are Marab, Morgott, and Nargog. Nice to meet you." It sounded like the Orc was speaking from a script, but realizing he wasn't in moral peril any longer, Jeremy grinned nervously. Hi, I'm Jeremy." Jarrett got the same look on his face as Naz did when she was trying to understand humans, but Jeremy didn't dare prod at him the way that he did Naz. However, Naz didn't have the same reluctance. "What's bothering you? Out with it." The larger Orc scratched his head. "Well, I was just wondering, why are you hanging out with this Humie? He doesn't look like he's very tough." Then, realizing he might be getting himself in trouble with Naz again, the Orc quickly followed up with, No offense or nothing, just wondering." Naz crossed her arms and looked at Jeremy, who looked back, half expecting her to make fun of him in a good-natured way that she sometimes did when it was just the two of them. But instead, she had an oddly serious tone to her voice as she answered, "He's not very strong, but he's loyal and a friend. Always there for you. That's all he needs to be." Finally, Derek grinned. "Well, Jeremy, nice to meet you." Now that the hierarchy was properly established, with Naz being the clear authority figure present, the rest of the Orcs greeted Jeremy in very practiced manners before the two groups split up and went their separate ways again. When they were far enough away, he wasn't afraid that they'd be overheard. Jeremy turned to Naz with disbelief in his voice. "Did you just say the same thing about me as I said about Dash?" Naz shrugged. They were good words. Not my fault it's true about you as it is your dog." Jeremy punched her lightly in the arm, the way he and his friends would occasionally do before realizing doing that with an Orc might be asking for more trouble than it was ready for. He froze up for a moment when Naz grinned evilly, before she grabbed his head and held him in a headlock while she ruffled his hair. "I didn't know you had it in you. Good for you. Well, we'll make you a proper Orc out of you yet." Thinking back to his near-death experience at the hands of Dirt not long ago, Jeremy gulped. Maybe I'd be better stick to being human. I'm not sure how long I'd survive as an Orc." It was the first day back at school, and Jeremy was wondering where Naz was. They'd ridden the bus together, and while the bunch of kids had stared, no one had given them any trouble. If anything, a few noteworthy individuals had left him more alone than usual, which suited him just fine. Then Naz had gone off to a day orientation for Orcs in school, and Jeremy hadn't seen her since. Jeremy's thoughts were interrupted by a particularly unpleasant voice behind him.
I saw you with your new girlfriend, Jeremy. She looks about right for you. Big, dumb, and ugly.
Turning around, Jeremy could see the biggest bully in the school, a kid named Thom. He didn't know why Thom had picked on him for so long, and right now, didn't care. Usually, he'd run or hide from the bigger kid, but after a summer with Naz, Thom didn't look nearly as big as he usually did, and the sneer that used to invoke fear just pissed Jeremy off today. Jeremy responded with a frown. She's not my girlfriend, and she's not stupid. Thom looked surprised and squinted.
What was that? I didn't hear you, runt.
Jeremy curled his hands into fists. I said, she's not stupid. Thom sneered and leaned in more closely.
Well, I think she is. Dad said all orcs are stupid and should be rounded up and run out of the city.
Jeremy didn't know what happened or when he decided to do it, but he suddenly found his fist flying forwards right into Thom's fat face. However, a giant green fist caught his mid-flight before it could hit. He didn't know where she'd come from, but Naz was suddenly by his side, and, try as he might, she wouldn't let go of his fist. But rather than looking angry, she just grinned before speaking. Much as I like you, Jeremy, no fighting in school. You could get into trouble that way. Realizing what he was doing and what was happening, Jeremy suddenly felt very ashamed, but Naz just winked. But apparently, Thom didn't like being left out, and he suddenly threw a sucker punch into the side of Naz's head. Rather than react in anger or pain, Naz just threw her head back and laughed before putting one very large and very heavy hand on Thom's shoulder, who was now shaking his hand as if it had hurt it somehow. I like you. Back home, that would be a great way to introduce yourself, but we're not here, and you're not strong enough to take me. And you're definitely not smart enough to take him. She nodded towards Jeremy, who wasn't feeling very smart right now. So why don't you just leave it be for now? One of the teachers was coming over, pushing their way through the crowd who circled around the scene, shouting as they came, Hey now, no fighting, no fighting. She seemed to be looking between Naz and Thom as if deciding who to blame. Realizing Naz couldn't get into big trouble if anyone claimed an orc had been fighting a human on her first day of school, Jeremy stepped out from everyone to speak to the teacher. No one was fighting, sir. Naz was just teaching Thom the traditional orc greeting, that's all. The teacher narrowed his eyes as if trying to see if there was a lie, but finally sighed as if digging any further wasn't worth the trouble. Coming from anyone else, I would have questions. But as long as you say so, Jeremy, I guess I'll let it go. Then turning to Naz, he continued, Just make sure you don't teach anyone too hard. You heard that what the principal said during orientation? The girl grinned. I've behaved just like I promised. With one final doubtful glare, the teacher turned and walked away from the scene, leaving Jeremy to sigh in relief. Naz ruffled his hair. See? Smart, just like I said. Jeremy smiled as he walked into his clinic. He had a feeling today was going to be a good day. However, he hesitated momentarily when he saw the look on his new vet tech's face. She looked positively panicked. With raised eyebrows, he decided to get to the heart of whatever was going on. Uh-oh, is something wrong? Don't tell me Mrs. Smith is having more trouble with Max. I told her she can't give him so much table food, no matter how much he begs. Looking at him as if it took her a moment to process him, she shook her head as if waking up from a trance. No, nothing like that. It's just, your first patient, Fluffy, is a little more than we can handle. Well, that didn't clear things up any. So, with a shrug, Jeremy decided to see for himself. What room? The tech blinked a few times before pointing down the hall. Room 13, but I put them back there so that they didn't scare the other patients. With a shrug, Jeremy walked back to the room 13. He knocked briefly before opening the door and coming face to face with a full-grown warg. Only a moment later, the orc who'd brought him in pulled the warg back by the leash tied around its neck, laughing as he did so. Back up, you ball of trouble! Let the doc in the room! When the oversized animal backed up as commanded, Jeremy followed him with a smile. Well now, this is a good-looking animal you've got here. Seems pretty healthy at a glance, mister. The orc laughed. Call me Rel, and he's pretty much healthy. I just wanted to bring him in for a checkup. Then, as if seeing the vet for the first time, the orc squinted a little. I thought you would be an orc. When I was told there was a vet here who would take on my troublemaker, I figured you'd have to be. But when I saw the look on your text face this morning, I was starting to worry that I'd make a mistake.
Jeremy smiled and shrugged. Oh, Jennifer is new here. I'll make sure she's more prepared next time, but don't worry, I'm perfectly capable of taking care of Fluffy here. He started giving Fluffy scritches in the spot all wargs liked, right behind the ear. Thankfully, wargs are much safer to work around than they looked. They are noticeably more intelligent than most dogs and are relatively easy to read if you know what to look for. As Jeremy went about the checkup, the orc looked impressed.
You really do know your way around a warg, don't you? They teach that in vet school now.
Jeremy grinned. Well, yes, but I'm probably a bit more familiar with wargs than most. My wife's got one, and for the kids a few years back, so I've got a lot of first-hand experience with them.
At that, the orc laughed even harder. Married one of us, said Doc. You're braver than I thought, or crazier.
Jeremy grinned, thinking back to how he'd been pulled along on one adventure after another through most of his childhood, sometimes almost against his will. Almost.
A little bit of both, I think.
His smile returned as Jeremy finished the checkup and saw the rest of his patients for the day. Just as he thought, today had been a good day. As he was finishing up some of his paperwork for the day, Naz came in, still covered in some of the sawdust that seemed to permeate most of their household, a side effect of a family business she inherited. She grinned. How was another day in the life of Jeremy the vet? Jeremy grinned back. Not bad. We got a new client today, a warg named Fluffy. Naz blinked a few times before breaking out in laughter.
Fluffy? Really? You gotta be kidding me.
Jeremy grinned but shook his head. Nope, that's really his name, I swear. Just let me finish up some of the paperwork and I'll get ready to go. Shouldn't be more than a few minutes. Naz frowned a little.
Just don't take too long. Dom invited us over for dinner tonight, or did you forget?
Jeremy looked up from the paperwork with minor panic. Oh God, I did forget. We were supposed to meet his new girlfriend today, right? I don't know if we'll have enough time to go home and shower. Naz nodded, looking suspiciously earnest.
Yep, but don't worry about that. Just clean up as well as you can. Somehow, I doubt Zozan will mind too much.
Jeremy blinked. Wait, Zozan?
Don't tell me. Naz grinned wide. Yep, he's dating an orc. You've obviously been a bad influence on your friends.
As he sat back, Jeremy grinned. I wonder if he knows how much trouble he's in for. This time, Naz looked offended, though judging by her grin tugging at the corner of her lips, it was only an act.
Oh, you say I'm trouble?
Jeremy simply rolled his eyes. Are you trying to say that you're not?
Naz winked. Wouldn't think of it. Just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that. Now, you finish up here, and I'll see what trouble I can think up while I wait.
As she walked out the door, Jeremy sighed. He knew Naz wouldn't actually make any trouble with any of the animals undergoing overnight treatments, but he suspected that turn of phrase would come back to haunt him in the coming days. Though, to be fair, after growing up with Naz, he knew what he was getting into when he married her. Besides, it was usually worth it. Usually. End of story. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons, Dragzoon WRE, Quantum Wednesday, Ambrose Cattell, Lord Ashrakal, Bushmaster 177, Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.